Welcome to this week's episode of the WorkJoy Jam podcast. This week, I've been joined by the fantastic adventurer, author, mischief maker, Anna McNuff, in a great conversation thinking about how we can all take some of the ideas and things that adventurers do into an everyday adventurous mindset and use that to help us create some work joy. Some of the things I really liked about this conversation is thinking about that curiosity. How do we keep that childlike interest about the things that are going on around us? What are the stories that we're telling ourselves, and are those stories true, or are they things that we've made up for ourselves when we don't match our own expectations or when things don't align with our own perceptions? And also, one of my favourite bits here is around how we all need some ripe bananas in our life. So it was great to talk to Anna. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. In this episode, we are joined by Anna McNuff, and she's going to introduce herself in a moment. So welcome, Anna. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. And it'd be great if you could intro yourself, maybe do a bit of your backstory and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm an adventurer, author, speaker, mischief maker. Long story short is that I had a career as an athlete, and then I went and worked in a corporate job. And in my late 20s, I turned to a life of adventure. And I ended up going off on adventures and coming back and writing and speaking about those adventures. And that is now how I make my living. And that is my jigsaw career.
I love it. It's such a great introduction that your job title, number one, made up by yourselves, and made up job titles are the best. But imagine the first bit of your job title when you were like a child thinking that your first bit would be an adventurer. How exciting is that?
I know. I think I was supposed to be a music therapist. That is actually what when you went to careers advisors at school, and you had to be told what you were going to be doing, and you filled in all these forms. And I was supposed to be a music therapist. But I do always say, especially when I'm talking to schools, I say to the kids, the jobs that you're going to be doing, they haven't been invented yet, or / you're going to have to invent them yourself. So I just find that just blows my mind and is really exciting, I think.
Really exciting. And I love the idea of being an adventurer. We're going to talk a bit more about that. And obviously then speaking and writing about your adventures to inspire people. But before we go into the detail of the WorkJoy, tell me more about Mischief Maker, because for somebody like me, that sounds like a lot of fun.
That does. Well, yeah, I just started putting it in there because I think I was getting to that point where I was actually able to make a living from things that I enjoyed doing, and I wasn't having so much pressure and anxiety about the daily hustle of it. And so I started thinking, I want to have some fun with this. And if I'm the one defining my job description, then I just want to put in what I believe to be true. And I am just such a believer that where there's mischief, there's fun, and we should all not behave in a childish way, but we can be more childlike in the way we approach things in terms of our curiosity and just the interest we have about the world around us. And I think that gets a bit squashed sometimes. So I thought Mischief Maker just seemed to sum it up perfectly. And I hadn't heard anyone else with that as their job title, so I stole it.
Yeah, I've never heard of anyone else that job title. And I think it's really exciting, and how true that often the things that excite us or give us some joy or make things fun, they get a bit squashed in the world of work sometimes, don't they?
Massively. They do. I think there's this, as you grow up, I think it's completely shown when you're in a meeting or a room with other people and you have a question pop into your head. And I don't know about you, but I remember certainly in the corporate world or in lots of situations even now, that the question pops into my head. And the second thing that pops into my head is, that's a stupid question, or someone's already asked that, when the reality is they haven't. And quite often when you actually pluck up the courage to ask that question, there are a lot of other people in the room going, oh, I'm so glad someone asked that, because I was feeling really stupid because it made no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
Especially when there's jargon being used. I'm like, sorry, what is that?
So what are you actually talking about?
What are you actually talking about? Or especially in a lot of my meetings, which involve, you're talking to a client who you're hoping is going to book you for something, and they're talking about things, and you're thinking, should I know about this? Is this something I should already have expertise in, and therefore I should understand that word they've just used? And so I try and make sure that if I don't understand it, there's just no shame in going, do you know what? I've absolutely no idea what you've just said. Can you explain that to me in layman's terms? And we'll go from there. And then actually they enjoy it because they go, oh, sorry, of course. I was in my little world. So I do think we lose that. And that's that sort of tendency to be like a child. And that's what I love when I do give talks to rooms full of children. They just don't care. They will just ask the question because there's the question popped into their mind, therefore it's going to come out their mouth, no matter how appropriate or not that question is. And I just think that's a wonderful thing to try and maintain.
I love that idea. And obviously, in the real world, we don't always want to be asking everything that pops into our head because we do need to have some form of what I like to call a professional filter. Because if I said everything that popped into my head all the time, there would be some effing and jeffing that goes on, which wouldn't be appropriate and things like that. But it's about how do we have a professional filter, but without a big filter, without filtering too finely out some of the things that could really bring us the joy or that could help us understand better or be more engaged with what's going on.
Yeah, I guess that's about practice, isn't it? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, if the things came out of adults' mouths that came out of the children's mouths that I've linked to, you'd probably be like, that's not really, how is that relevant? Or things like, oh, did I leave the oven on this morning when I left the house? Probably not relevant. But I think that's with practice. And I think it's a similar practice too when, as time's gone on, I've tried to become more assertive. So when someone says something or discusses an option and I'm actually not happy with it or I'm not comfortable with it, old Anna would have just gone, yeah, that's great, fantastic. When really inside I'm going, no, I'm not comfortable with that. That's not going to work for me. And so I've tried to get better at catching that moment. And I think that filter for asking the right questions is a very similar thing. You've got to be able to just catch it really quickly and go, I have a question. Do I really need to know this thing? If I do, I'm going to ask. If the only thing stopping me asking is because I think it's a silly question, then that's not a valid reason. Just take that out. So I guess there's a sort of a 4-stage process that happens really quickly in your brain, but I think it does take, it's like training a muscle, isn't it? It just takes practice. But I think the major thing is if you want to know something, just ask.
Definitely. And the more people ask, the more people are aware of what's going on or how they come across or what information is missing or how much jargon people use and understanding and engaging people. So definitely. So tell me a bit more about in your world and from what you've been doing, adventuring, speaking, talking to kids, authoring lots of books and in your world. What are the things that you think people can do to get more joy in their work? So get the WorkJoy factor going.
Good, really good question. So last year I started actually mapping this on in physical form on paper, and every day I had this journal where at the start of the day I'd write down what are the 3 things that I want to do today, like what are my top 3 priorities, because I think if you've got more than 3 they're not going to happen. And my I used to have to-do lists in notebooks, but now I have to-do lists on post-it notes, because if it can't fit on that post-it note, it is not happening in that day or in that week. So I started, really interesting thing, I started tracking what I'd set out to do that day and then how I actually ended up spending the hours of that day. And then I would go back and I would highlight the things that I'd enjoyed or that were / on track with what I wanted to be doing. And then in a different color, I would highlight the things that I'd felt like were a complete waste of time, even though they needed doing, or they were things that I could have actually outsourced or got someone else to do because either it's not my area of expertise or I really just absolutely despise doing it. And it was really interesting. I did it for a period of sort of 3 months, and there were patterns that started to emerge. And I found that a really useful process. Now, of course, there are things we have to do that we don't always want to do, filling in forms and paying taxes and all of that. But wherever possible, I just keep asking myself the question, can someone else do this? Are they better qualified to do it? Is it worth me paying a freelancer for them to do it, because that investment of money, actually my time is better spent? I always measure it against, I could have written a chapter of a book in the space of 2 hours versus I spent 2 hours trying to work out how to update this thing on my website, which would have taken someone else 20 minutes, So I guess writing it down was a really big process for me, and looking at it and going, well, how am I spending my days, and what are the things I enjoy doing and what are the things I don't enjoy doing, and then seeing if there's any way I can take out the things that I don't enjoy doing. Sounds simple, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's really interesting because it's one of the first activities we do on the WorkJoy coaching program.
Is it?
Actually just track, just find out what is giving you joy, what isn't, what's going on for you, how you're feeling about stuff. Because so often I think we walk through life just unconscious of all of these things, apart from our mood. So we kind of need to say, oh, I'm in a bad mood or I'm in a good mood, but never actually really understanding why, or what are the factors that have made you in a good mood, or what are the factors that have really kind of got you down, and are you overplaying or underplaying some of those things. And I love your idea there that, you know, you can outsource the stuff that, you know, isn't something that you enjoy or something that you're good at. But there is still, and this is one of the big things I talk to a lot of people about, is there is still, even if you like, you are an adventurer, that is your job title, you get to write books and go on adventures and do talks and all exciting stuff. On paper, like, your job is awesome, right?
Yes, on paper, yes, yeah. But
on
yeah, paper, I know where you're going with this.
You still have to do the adulting stuff, don't you? Of like organizing yourself and paying taxes, and there's still going to be some stuff in your world that, although your job as a whole is brilliant and awesome, and you've created this life with your work for yourself, there is still some stuff that isn't going to bring you joy within that.
100%, and so classic on the tax return. So one of the things about being a limited company is, of course, you have to do your own tax returns. And even though I have an accountant that helps me, but you still have to submit all that information. And on my last adventure, where I was running from the Shetland Islands to London last year, it got about 3 weeks out from my tax deadline. And so I was having to run during the day, do all the social media of the adventure. And then no one, of course, knew on Instagram or whoever was following that I was then spending like 3 hours in the evening trying to get my tax return completed while I'm on this adventure. It was just hell on earth. And that was my own fault for not getting it sorted before I left, of course. But you are so right. I think you've got to take with a pinch of salt anything that you see. If someone has this perfect, beautiful looking career that looks like it's all fun, there is always so much hard work and drudgery going on behind the scenes. And there is certainly, I mean, being an adventurer that is the title, but it is misleading, because really you actually make your money from speaking, writing and brand partnerships, and all of that requires you being sat at a laptop and being on the email or being on phone or being, you know, events, when we were having in-person events. So yes, you're so right. There is the reality versus perception. And for me, it's always still worth it. I think that the moment it stops becoming worth it, the drudgery stops becoming worth the fact that I can make my own hours, and sometimes I work weekends, but sometimes I go for a bike ride on a Wednesday afternoon. You know, that's when it'd be time to look at shifting in a different direction. But for now, it's worth it. But there is a lot of drudgery too.
But you're so right. Like, I don't think I'd see on your Instagram or your Twitter or wherever else, whatever social things people use, you wouldn't be sitting there saying, oh, today I'm doing 3 hours on my tax return. You'll be doing here's my 7 hours of running, because that's what I do and that's what needs to be out there. We don't share that stuff. So our perception often as other people is that they have it better than us. But what we need to remember is that's all through a big filter, isn't it? It's through what we put out there.
Yeah, it's massively curated. And the reality is, you know, I do try every now and then and put in a you know, perception versus reality, but you can't do it too often, because your brand is the exciting stuff. That is, if you made everything about what you had for breakfast and the fact that you've got to fill in some forms for the solicitor that day, like, it's just not what people follow you for. You know, it's just not really the bag. So but it is a fine line. So, and I'm always trying to just keep things as real as possible, to the point of, like, I never wear makeup when I go in to do a school talk, or if I'm doing videos for kids and stuff like that. And I just think little things like that, I'm trying to go, this is reality, this is as it is, as best I can.
Love that. Love it. And talk to me a little bit more now about what made you think of being an adventurer, and how do you start that as a career? Because it's not one that any careers advisor would tell you to do.
No, and it comes with an awful lot of uncertainty and hustle, and lying awake at night and wondering whether what you're doing is all a waste of time and you should just go back and get a normal job. And And I guess I was reluctant at first. So when I started doing these adventures, I took a sabbatical from my corporate job. I'd gone to hand in my notice and they said, well, how about we just give you 8 months off and you come back to a paycheck? And I thought, yes, please. Thanks very much. Because I'm all going to have
great.
Nothing.
That's a good reaction, right?
I know. But again, that is an example of when you want to do something badly enough. And I thought, I don't know where this is going. I don't care what happens after this, but I have to go and do this thing, this big, I was riding a bike through every state of America. I thought I have to go and do it. And then the bonus of that was because I had nothing to lose and I was leaving anyway, they said, well, do you want to come back? And they'd never given anyone a sabbatical that long before. It wasn't in the policy. And so, I mean, it didn't last very long once I was back there, unfortunately. But and so at first I thought, right, this is the way my life's going to work. I'm going to do 6 months of adventuring. I'll then do contract marketing work for 6 months and I will self-fund my adventures and I'll just do that for the rest of my life. I'll be really happy. And the more adventures I did, the more it became apparent that that was where my true self was. And that was where I felt my most creative and my most fulfilled. And so the marketing work became survival work. And then it took me, I think, about 6 years of going backwards and forwards and taking contracts that were less and less in terms of, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week, until eventually after 6 years, I was able to say, do you know what? I now make all of my living from the stories I've built up through adventure. But that was a long time.
It's not a 0 to hero situation, is it? It's not an overnight success. It took years to get there.
Yeah, and there's no swan dive out the window. I think that's that's what people again, that's what people see. And also what they don't see is one of those trips I came back and I was absolutely like no money whatsoever. And then worse than that, I was living back with my parents. I then tried to get a job that would pay me, a marketing job. And then I couldn't get the marketing job because my CV was so bizarre because I'd done sort of 4 years of this like stop-startiness. And I was like halfway there. And at that point, I had such a meltdown because I thought, am I doing this wrong? Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm working so hard. And the reality was I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just kept doing the same stuff. And then it was just that the financial side of things they were sort of 6 months to a year behind and they just needed to catch up, if you see what I mean. Yeah. All the effort I'd put in just hadn't quite made it there yet. And I think it was a phone call with my mum, and she's the most risk averse woman on the planet. And she said to me, I was crying down the phone from some cafe in Patagonia, being like, Mum, I'm such a failure. I'm going to come back. I've got no money. And what am I doing with my life? And she said, I think I said something like, I'm not successful. And she said, you are successful. You're just not getting paid for it yet. And I went, okay. And that was it. And she was so right. Literally 6 months after that, everything just started taking off because of all the effort I'd put in over the years. So, yeah, of course, Mum loves what I do now. She's very proud of me. And of course, she thinks it's a wonderful idea. But earlier on in the career, she wasn't quite so sure and convinced. So that was big news coming from her.
Yeah, and what great advice as well, isn't it? Thinking about that idea that just because you've planted the seeds now, the flowers aren't going to grow straight away. You have to wait. And sometimes it's about the effort and the things you're putting into it and really committing to it and being on it that will make it happen versus expecting it all to come straight away.
Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of people who try to make that leap from a traditional job to one that is more unstable in terms of income and contracts and certainty, I think some of these people, it can be given up on too early. But at the same time, I've got a lot of friends who have tried to make that leap and they've just found the uncertainty of it too much. And so they've had to kind of backtrack and find a halfway house. And I think that's great too, because I think in that process, you learn what kind of person you are. And there's no point in loving what you do every day, but then going to bed at night and having panic attacks that you're not going to have a steady income. I think you've got to find where you are on that spectrum of what you need to be able to feel comfortable and secure, but also fulfilled. And that's different for everyone. So anything goes, really.
Definitely. And let's not forget, some people love the traditional job, the standard, the process of it all, the teamwork, all the things that you get. And it's just different horses for different courses, isn't it?
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think that is definitely one thing that I will always say is if you're in your job and it is a normal 9 to 5 and you love it, fantastic. I wished life would be so much simpler if I was one of those people, and that's why I knew I had to leave my office job, because everyone around me was so excited about what they were doing and I wasn't. And I thought something's wrong here. These people love being here every day. And so if you're one of those people and you love it, cracking. That's all you ever need in life. And my siblings are those people. I've got two brothers who I'm the wayward sister, and there was an accountant and a project manager, and they just love their jobs, and that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll just think cracking.
Brilliant stuff. So tell me a little bit more on the side of, so thinking about people who are in a job, whether they work for themselves or they work in a traditional job. Sense of adventure, I think, is a really important thing, whatever that sense is and however big or small. So your sense of adventure is obviously massive because you're out there adventuring, massive big challenges, big projects, cycling across all the states in America, running across the UK, all of the things that you've done. But how can we think about a sense of adventure from within our working context? What are the things we might be able to think about that gives us more of an adventurous mindset, even if we're not fully full-time adventurers like you?
That's really good question. I think it all comes down to how you define adventure, and adventure in my mind isn't necessarily about the size or the scale or the length of it. Adventure is just stepping out of your front door and trying to have a new experience or look at something that you thought was familiar but with a fresh set of eyes. And so this year's a great example of that, because we've been confined a lot to the area around our home and our local area, which meant that suddenly the sphere for adventure has shrunk. And at first that felt like freedom had been taken away. And then suddenly I realized there were all these trails in the park opposite our house that I had never explored. And so I spent 3 months trying to run every different trail in that section of woods opposite the house. So I think what people can take from an adventurous mindset is it's just about keeping that childlike curiosity for the world around you. And my adventures always start with, I couldn't possibly do that. And then it goes, I wonder if I could ... And that can be applied to anything, because you realize actually when you come up with an idea, the second set of thoughts that pile into your brain are all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. But also in there are all these stories we tell ourselves and all these assumptions we've made of things that are true that actually they're not the truth. They're what we believe. And it's classic with things like saying, oh, I'm no good at languages. Well, that's not actually true. You could be good at languages if you wanted to. And so all these things that we tell ourselves, and for me it was, oh, I'm not a runner. And so I did one of my adventures to go, well, am I? Maybe I could be a runner. Maybe a runner isn't what I see on the front of a running magazine, or it's not Mo Farah and his little skinny shorts on the telly going around the athletics track. Maybe a runner is someone who goes slowly and over mountains and eats date and orange scones and drinks lots of flat whites. So I think it's about just trying to take that adventurous mindset, which is that curiosity of, I wonder what happens if I do this, and let's find out and go from there, rather than actually stopping ourselves and telling ourselves we can't do it before we even give it a bash.
It's so true, though. When you said the idea that the second set of thoughts after the idea is usually, here are 300 reasons why I can't do that. I think we can all probably relate to that as a consideration of what we do. It's like, oh, I could try doing this. And you say you're not a runner, and I go, how could you ever have thought you're not a runner? You ran the length of the UK, and I believe you did it without any shoes on.
Yeah, I did. That's crazy. But even now, I don't feel like I am, even though I like to run. I always say I like to run, but I'm not a runner. And I think that's just because of this perception we have of runners and what that, and there's this sort of othering, isn't there? There's this, oh, that person or that group of people are other to me. And I think I always remember when I was in a 9-to-5 job, that the directors and the CEOs and the people that were in positions of power above me, that they seemed other, like they must have this sort of seventh sense that, skip the sixth one, they've got seventh sense, and they just know. And actually you realize it's years of experience, and they're pretty much just like you, and they've learned it all. So Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and those the thoughts and the reasons not to do stuff never stop. They never quieten down.
So I'm sitting there thinking about you on all your adventures and how easy this idea would be for other people to go, oh well, Anna's just got this special skill or this special thing. And I'm not saying you haven't got special skills or special things within you that make you be able to be an adventurer that I could never have. But actually, from what you're saying, it's more about just deciding to do it versus actually having something special that you are, that you are other or different to everyone else.
Yeah, so a great example actually I've read a lot about recently is and bear with me on this one, Beth, but cold water swimming. Okay, cold water swimming.
Yeah.
When you go into cold water, your body has this fight or flight response. All these things get released. You've got endorphins and just all these cortisol flying around your body, and your body is screaming, get out of this water. It is freezing. What are you doing? You nutter, turn and run. And then if you keep doing it, if you do it every few days and you go into cold water, actually you start controlling your breathing and you are relaxed and you're almost very aware of your body's reaction to that, because your body's screaming you to run in the other direction, but you're overriding it with your brain and saying, it's fine, I know this is all good, let's calm, let's chill out. And you find that you can stay in longer and longer. I was fascinated by this because I thought, well, maybe the effects are lessened, and maybe the physiological effect when you go into that cold water is actually lessened every time you go in. But the reality is it isn't. Actually, when you go into cold water, the same amount of chemicals are rushing around your body, but it's your brain's response to it. And so your brain then goes, I'm not stressed out by that anymore. I'm much more used to it. And that is the way I feel about these adventures that I've done, is that I still feel all those feelings and I still feel that moment of what on earth am I doing? And please can a hole in the universe just open up and swallow me up so I don't have to go through with this. But I'm more used to it by now that I just go, oh, hang on, I've been here before and it's okay. And so I think that it's just about practicing it. So rather than when you feel that rush of, oh my gosh, I don't want to be doing this, and lots of your body or your brain is screaming at you that it's a bad idea and just give it up and stop, that actually, that if you just start overriding that, even really, really slowly, the more you do it, the easier it becomes next time, even though the feelings are still there, if that makes sense.
I love that as a really concrete example. And I'm sitting there thinking, I did some cold water swimming this year and I totally loved it.
It's amazing.
I love water in whatever version it comes in, and I felt like a whole real human being. It was like a really weird sensation, so I totally get it from that. But as an example of it is practice, it is repetition, it's experience within that, and being able to manage your reaction to something versus go with what your brain is telling you, because our brains don't always tell us the truth.
No, and it's our primal brain as well, of course, and we are built to survive. Therefore, we're built to catastrophize and look at what the worst possible scenario is to protect ourselves. But we don't live in a jungle with tigers chasing us anymore. Well, I don't anyway. I mean, you might, but
I don't, but people do.
Some people do, exactly. So it's just about trying to, I guess, like you say, train it. But I love that you've got into cold water swimming. It's cracking.
Yeah,
great for the brain.
I need to do it more, but it was amazing. The best bit about it was watching my husband on the side of the river look at me like I was insane. And I've seen that look many times in our marriage, but never to this kind of level. And when I suggested that maybe he put his toe in, he was like, no, thank you.
You get so much bang for your buck, though. You can be literally, I mean, I don't know about you, I'm in there for about 2 to 3 minutes and I come out and I feel awesome for 4 hours afterwards. That's it. I'm not actually swimming, I'm just cold water paddling.
Totally amazing. I don't really swim. I just kind of sit in awe of how amazing it makes you feel. I think it's brilliant.
That is it.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about your joy and on your adventures or in what you're doing. What are the things that you've done that you've kind of felt that real high of the joy in your work?
I think I get a lot of physiological joy from, if I'm running up a mountain, gorgeous blue skies, my lungs are on fire, my legs are burning, but the scenery around me is just phenomenal and I am high as a kite on those moments. I am thinking, this is amazing, look at this world, look at this planet, and you're just full of all these good things pumping around your body. So I get a lot of joy from that process. Conversely, there's
Love
a lot of
that.
times when that is not happening. So you have to really, yeah.
But the thing is, though, to get that level of joy, to be able to run up a mountain and do it, there's 1,000,001 steps before that, right? That aren't all
Absolutely.
joyful.
Absolutely. And there are the days when it's cold, it's miserable, it's wet, you can't see anything whatsoever. Your body's tired, you're hungry, you've run out of food, all of that going on. So there's the physical element that I love from adventuring, that I just get high as a kite. But that can also happen when I used to live in London. I'm running across Richmond Park in London, and I'm like, oh my God, look at that deer! Woo! Yeah, it doesn't have to be up a mountain in New Zealand. And then I guess what I've learned as time goes on, I love to tell the stories. So I get a lot of joy out of crafting a story, whether that's doing it to deliver in a talk, or whether I'm actually just sitting down and putting it in a book. And normally there's a lot of overlap between the two things. They sort of, if I've developed a story for a talk, it then ends up in a book, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that process because it's very cathartic, and it's almost like you're reliving the adventure. It's double whammy. You get to live it all over again and feel the things you felt, and look at pictures and try and conjure up, I guess, just all the senses. And because I'm trying to take the person that's reading or watching into that world with me. I'm trying to say, leave everything else behind, come with me into this place, and this is what you're seeing, this is what you're smelling. And I get great joy out of that. And that means that when something happens that's really cool, that I think this is going to be an awesome story, that I then get excited after it's happened as well, because I think now that is a story. Like I was in Chile in South America, and I got bitten by a dog, which was dreadful. But I remember having the foresight at the time to say to my friend Faye, as there's like blood pumping down my leg and I'm thinking about I need to go and get a rabies shot, going, Faye, take a picture, because this is going to be a really good story if I survive. Which, beforehand I would have been too frightened, but I thought, well, if you do make it out of this particular predicament you're in, as long as you're not putting yourself in any more danger by recording it, then you need to record this because it's a good story.
Yeah. So that 1 second didn't make a difference in the healing process from your
No,
wound.
it didn't. No.
And it's interesting as well. One thing that we talk about in the WorkJoy theory of life, is what I'm calling it at the moment, is that one of the things you really need is a really good squad around you. That success and joy very rarely happen in the things that you're doing, that you've done just on your own. So talk to me a little bit about when you adventure, or before you adventure, or after you adventure. Who do you put around you? What's your squad that helps you to do the adventures?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I wrote an article recently about this, actually, about finding. I called it "Surround Yourself with Ripe Bananas," because obviously, if you want some fruit to ripen in a fruit bowl, you put it next to the ripe banana, don't you? So this the article was related to running, but I was saying how grateful I was, because my family are a bit bonkers anyway. I mean, I've got 2 parents that went to the Olympics. I've got 2 brothers that are incredibly supportive of their bonkers, slightly wayward sister, and just roll their eyes and smile, and are very, very supportive. And I have a boyfriend who does similar things to me in terms of he does adventures and he gives talks about them. So I just became very aware how grateful I was of having those people around me. But also, I guess in the journey of the last 6 to 10 years, I have had people in my life or come into it who aren't that positive voice. And sometimes those people there, it can really hurt, especially if they're close to you, because you value their opinion. So it's difficult not to take it on and to start doubting yourself, especially when you're in that. I find at the start of something new, your thoughts are very fragile. They're sort of, I describe it like a ball of threads. All my fears are in this thread ball, and there's all these loose edges around the edge. And if someone pulls one of those threads, it's like the whole ball just unravels, and then you're just this mess of fears at your feet. And parents are very good at doing this. I mean, like I said, my mum was quite nervous about when I was first starting on this journey in my new career, and she had a lot of her own fears about financial stability and stuff. So I guess as the years have gone on, I've just learned to focus less on the comments from the people that aren't supportive, and just turn towards the ones that are, and think, unfortunately, I can't change those opinions of those people. And actually, the more time goes on, the more you realize when someone says something to you that isn't supportive and they're not being your cheerleader, it's a reflection of their own fear and not yours. And once you realize that, you just go, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. That's what you're frightened about, not what I'm frightened about. Thanks for that, but cool. I'll take it and move on.
Yeah, like you don't have to copy their fear. Their fear can be their fear, your fear can be different to theirs. So I can totally imagine a situation where you're talking to someone who totally loves their corporate 9 to 5 and the stability and all the things that gives them, being very fearful of having no guaranteed income and wandering around the country with no shoes on. That is kind of part of how people experience things differently.
Oh, absolutely. And one of my jobs that I left, I had a really shocking reaction from one of my superiors who I'd always loved and got on with really well, but they'd been at the company a very long time. And their reaction to me leaving was it was very strong and not nicely worded. And I was just shocked. But what I realized was it because they'd been in that life for so long, and perhaps there were elements of it they weren't happy with. And all of that had then come out on me. And like, you can't leave. How come you get to leave? You know, it was like that. Yeah. And I was just shocked. And I was young at the time, so I didn't really understand it. But looking back now, I can completely see what had happened. So yeah, it's tough. But I think if someone is offering you advice that you didn't necessarily ask for, I think the biggest thing is to sit down and go, am I worried about that? Like me, am I actually worried about that? And if you're not, then let it go.
Yeah. And I always think about this as well, is that, that question you asked earlier about like, it is going to be scary. You're going to have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Is you might be a little bit worried about it, but you might also be really excited about it. And is your excitement outweighing your worry?
Yes, I always say if you feel 50% terrified, 50% excited, that is the right thing to be doing. Absolutely, 100%. So it'll have both those elements in it.
Because effectively, if you're not worried or terrified or a little bit scared, it's not really pushing you out of your comfort zone, is it?
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and the more you go, oh, this feeling means that there is something awesome on the other side of this. That feeling of wanting to turn and run in the opposite direction. As soon as you get that feeling, great, keep going. Means there's good stuff ahead.
Like, feel the fear and keep going.
That's it. That's exactly it. And I talk about it in terms of a lot of people, I think, see that all those reasons of not to do something and that fear and that imposter syndrome, all of that stuff we have, they see it as a wall, and actually it's not. It's this doorway. It can be pushed open. There's a secret, like a library bookshelf in the wall. You just push a book and the door will open. You'll go through it, but it feels like it's a blocker, and it's not. It's actually got a hole in it somewhere. You just need to find how to get through.
Yeah, so you just have to keep working until you find the right way and keep going at it, rather than just saying, oh, I'll just turn back and go back to what I've always done and live in my comfort zone of okayness.
Exactly.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all those bits of insight and inspiration. And it's so lovely hearing about your adventures and how you get that adventuring mindset. I do have some quick fire questions for you.
Do it.
If you're happy to go for it. Right. First one. And maybe think about this one as, rather than the massive, I'm at the high of my adventure, think about it as more of small everyday thing. Okay. What's one small thing that will always guaranteed bring you some work joy?
Oh, that's a really good one. One small thing that will always bring me some when I feel like the best version of myself. That was it. And that can be on an adventure, but also for me, that can be I'm sat at my laptop writing about an adventure I've had, and my happy place is between my brain and my fingertips. So I think it's, where do you feel like the best version of yourself in your day and your week? Go there.
Brilliant. And that will tell you so much if you explore that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it takes a while to work that out. But when you're behaving like a terrible human being, because I do that all the time. So what the opposite, when you're just like, what is wrong with me? I'm so grumpy. Like, why? So you just got to find the opposite of that.
Yeah. Find the bit where you just feel most like yourself, most inspired, most interested, most engaged, most focused. And that's probably where you should spend more time.
Absolutely.
Next one. What book are you currently reading?
Oh, I'm reading. It's a good one, actually. It's called You're Not Listening by Kate. I think it's Kate Murphy. and it is all about listening, and listening as a skill, and how we are basically we brought up, or we live in a world where we're learnt to talk a lot, but actually the amazing skill is in listening, and how much you can gain from listening, and really listening, not doing the thing where you nod your head and go but actually where you try and hear what the person is saying, even if what they're saying isn't necessarily the words that are coming out their mouth. It's the story behind the story kind of thing. So I really enjoyed that, because I'm fascinated by the idea of listening properly. I think you can learn a lot, even though I talk a lot, but you need balance.
Definitely. And it's a big part of curiosity, isn't it? Actually listening and really getting to understand what's not being said as well as what is being said.
Absolutely. And the best stuff that has happened on all of my adventures I've been on is when I'm sat at a dinner table with a host in a local area, Midwestern America, that's taken me in, and I just listen to their life story, and I love it. And you learn so much about the world by just sitting and being quiet. It's brilliant.
Excellent. Next question. What's the best or most useful bit of advice that someone's given you that you always come back to?
I'm going to quote my mum on this one. My mum is, I don't know if these are her exact words, but basically she is a give it a bash person. She just gives it a bash. And I'm talking, mum she does all the DIY in the house. She can tile a bathroom. She can change a car engine. Anything she doesn't know how to do, she will just go, I'll just get on YouTube. I'll just look it up. I'll just give it a bash. It'll be fine. What's the worst that can happen? And I, having grown up watching that, is such a strong influence on me that you never know. Just give it a bash. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be the best. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just give it a bash and see where you go from there. Yeah, just
Brilliant.
try.
Great advice.
There you go.
And great to not just have been advice, but to be like a role model for what you actually doing it, not just saying to do it.
Massively. You should see in our household. So I'm putting flat pack furniture together, and even the way I use a screwdriver, Jamie, my boyfriend's going, how did you just do that? And it's, I know it sounds silly, but just, I've grown up watching my mum use a screwdriver with a proper amount of force to get that screw into the thing, and watching my boyfriend do it, I'm like, for goodness sake, give me the screwdriver, Jay. Yeah. So that's it. It's been such a huge role model in every sense.
Love it. Let's think about really practical stuff now. So for our listeners, what is one super practical bit of advice for them on something that they could go and do now, tomorrow, the next day that would help them, from your perspective, get more work joy?
I think it's about tracking and tracking what you do and what brings you joy, because I don't think we approach our days with enough consciousness of that. Like you say, we just tumble through our days and we think that things have to be done, and we don't stop to question, does this have to be done by me? Do I enjoy it? And so I think approaching your day with that sort of journalistic mindset and that curiosity, and really being aware of what does bring you joy and what doesn't, I think that's something that could really help.
Brilliant. And 2 more questions before we finish off. The first one is, what do you think your next adventure is going to be?
Well, I have 8 months worth of little baby human in my belly as we speak. So my next adventure is being a mother, which is, I've heard, quite hard work apparently, and so exciting. So that again is a whole world of unknowns, and I have found even preparing for birth and life after birth as a whole, just a terrifying thing. But that's it, that's life, everything's going to change, and we're still going to be adventuring, we're still going to have life as adventurers. It's just going to be very different from now on. So there is a big change happening around Christmas time.
How exciting, and many congratulations to you. But give it a bash, parenting, see how it goes.
That's it. There's no rule book, is there? That's it. We'll give it a bash.
And being a mischief maker, toddlers and things will probably be quite good fun.
I'm really looking forward to that, actually, and I just love listening to kids talk as well. Once our little one gets talking, I'm just like, the things that come out their mouth, I just think they're brilliant. I just think, great, I love it. Yeah,
total zero filters. It'll be amazing.
Absolutely.
And my final question is really for our listeners, and where can they find out more about you, your philosophy, your work, what you do, your books, etc.?
Oh, yeah, good one. So if you just type into Google or a search engine, Anna McNuff, McNuff, everything about me will pop up. I'm on all the social media platforms, and I've got a website, and I'm the only Anna McNuff in the whole world, which makes it a lot easier to find me.
Love that. Having a unique name is helpful.
Yes, definitely.
Brilliant. So pop on there, you'll be able to find Anna's books, details of her adventures, keep in touch, and maybe even see the baby when it arrives and say hi.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna, so much for being part of the WorkJoy Jam podcast. It's been fantastic speaking to you. And I really love your advice and guidance, and the idea that adventuring doesn't have to be massive. It can be the little things that you do every day, pushing yourself into something new, trying something out, giving it a bash. Great advice from your mum there too. So huge thank you, and maybe we'll speak to you again soon.
I would love it. Thank you so much, and good luck with everyone on their WorkJoy journeys.
Thanks, Anna.
Bye.
I really loved talking to Anna about her adventures and how to have a more adventurous mindset to help us to create and cultivate some work joy in our lives. Some things that I'm definitely going to be taking away, 2 things this time, are that idea, the advice from her mum, and don't mums sometimes give great advice, about just give it a bash. What's the harm in trying? What's the worst that can happen by giving something a go? And that idea that if you're 50% terrified and 50% excited, that's where the good stuff is going to be. So make it happen. And also totally align with Anna's advice about do some tracking. Understand what it is in your daily life, in your work, that brings you joy, what does and what doesn't, and do more of what does. And if you can, it's not always possible, but if you can, do less of the stuff that doesn't. Thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback. Remember that you can get involved in the conversation on our Instagram, which is Create Work Joy. And you can also look us up on the web at createworkjoy.com. Thank you all.